Hello, and welcome to the lecture on censorship. There's a couple reasons I wanted to specifically talk about censorship in this class. One of them is because we've covered some controversial topics, which can, of course, lead to instances of censorship. And also, there's a disturbing number of diverse books that have been challenged or banned. For example, Melinda Lowe, in her study of looking at censorship in diverse books, she looked at the list of banned and challenged books from 2000 to 2009 for it available at ALA. And she looked at which books contain diversity, not necessarily only those written by diverse individuals, but contain some type of diversity in their main characters, in their topics, or in their secondary characters if the secondary character was important. And she found that over 52%, more than half of the books that were challenged or banned in 2000 to 2009 contained diverse content. As we've discussed, the number of books with diverse content is not large. Remember, we looked at those CCBC statistics, which showed, only a small number of books each year being published that have diverse protagonists. So this is a slightly larger pool because she's also looking at diverse topics, but most of that would also contain diverse protagonists. So considering that, to have over half of the books challenged in these 10 years contain diverse content really shows how these books are the subject more so than other books, way more so than other books, of challenges. She also examined 2010 to 2013. ALA lists the books they give you a 10-year list, and then they keep track of as they go. And so this was published in 2014, and she found virtually the same 52% of the books challenged during that time period contained diverse content. So this is really worrisome that so many of the books that we've been talking about over the course of this summer would possibly be subject or have a better a better chance of being challenged based on these statistics and looking at the percentage of books challenged out of all of the books that are published every year. And not every book is challenged in the year it's published, but this is an example. This book is a particular example. I believe it was on your list for the first week of reading. Tango Makes Three. It is based on a true story, which actually happened in a Central Park 2. Two male penguins were trying to hatch a rock, and the following year, after the zookeepers observed it, they were given an abandoned egg to hatch, and they raised Tango. Tango Makes Three. And as you can see for this list, it's been challenged. 2006 was the first year it was out, so it was number 1 2006, 2007, 2008, dropped all the way to number 2 in 2009, back up to 1. There were a couple years where it's not in the top 10, and then 2017 we have it back again at number 9. Some of those years they were not in the top 10, it was 11 or 13, so it's been consistently a target of challenge. And the reasons are given: homosexuality, unsuited for age group, religious viewpoint, anti-ethnic, I'm not sure why, anti-family, and sexism. So it's difficult to understand why this book has been challenged quite so many times. And Justin Richardson, who's one of the authors, said, "We wrote the book to help parents teach about same-sex parent families. It's no more an argument in favor of human gay relationships than it is a call for children to swallow their fish whole or sleep on rocks," which I thought was a great quote. This is another example of a challenged book in West Cobb, Georgia. It was somebody challenged its inclusion not in the library, not in the class library, but in the book fair as an indoctrination of Muslim culture. This is a gorgeous book that it's called Golden Domes. My thing is, or Golden Domes, Silver Lanterns. It's a Muslim book of colors. So it just talks about gold is for the color of domes, and silver is for the color of lanterns, and green is something, and I don't even remember. And it's just a very beautiful, beautiful book. And here it was challenged, even being sold in the book fair. So NCTE, the National Council for Teachers of English, notes that any work is potentially open to attack by someone, somewhere, sometime, for some reason. And it's often seeming to us on the other side arbitrary and irrational. So it's very hard to predict when a book is going to be challenged and why it's going to be challenged. So we're going to talk a little bit about self-censorship at the end of this lecture, but just keep in mind that you can't predict every reason why a book might be challenged. A case in point is the Lorax. Who would have thought the Lorax would be challenged? But in 1989, it was challenged in California for criminalizing the foresting industry. And I guess I kind of understand this. If your dad's a timber, works in the timber industry, and we're kind of, although if I remember the Lorax correctly, it wasn't necessarily let's not cut down anything, but let's be sustainable in cutting down forests. And it wasn't so much the timber industry, and perhaps as the manufacturing industry, from the message I got out of the Lorax anyway. So the ALA also includes in their Library Bill of Rights our responsibilities as librarians for making books available to our patrons. Books and other library resources should be provided for interest, information, and enlightenment of all people of the community the library serves. Materials should not be excluded because of the origin, background, or views of those contributing to their creation. All points of view and historical issues should not be prescribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. Challenge censorship in the fulfillment of the responsibility to provide information and enlightenment. Cooperate with persons and groups concerned with resisting abridgment of free expression and free access to ideas. And then a person's right to use the library should not be denied or abridged. So because of the origin, age, background, or views. We don't have to necessarily worry about meeting spaces, which is the last clause. So ALA, in continuing to look at what she found, what Melinda Lowe found when examining the most challenged book lists, you can see that this is for the top 10 for 2017, and there's still books on here that contain diverse content are now being challenged. We have Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, which is Native American drama, LGBTQ. Kite Runner includes sexual violence and was thought to lead to terrorism and promote Islam, which I didn't get through that book, but it doesn't seem to me that that would be what it was trying to do. George, which was on your lists, I know. Book written by a certified sex educator because it addresses sex education. To Kill a Mockingbird is challenged often because of the violence and use of the N-word. The Hate You Give is a new book out by Angie Thomas, also written by an African-American about African-Americans and police brutality. Tango Makes Three, here it is, 2017, number 9, and I Am Jazz, which is also LGBTQ content. So if you go through the lists, you can see that there's often diverse characters in books that are challenged, and these are just the top 10 for each year. This timeline is kind of interesting. I'm going to put the slides up on the put the slides up so that you can click through and look at some of these things, but it gives you the reason when things were challenged and the reason they were challenged. And you can see some of them are due to are diverse content. Again, here we have Tango Makes Three, King and King, Catcher in the Rye, Fallen Angels, which is and it's not always explicitly challenged because of the because it's about diverse content, but it seems like if it's diverse, there's a greater chance that it will be challenged, in whether other books similar to it or not exist. Huckleberry Finn, so that's just kind of interesting to see. Bluest Eye was challenged. Satanic Verses was challenged because this gives a little. I was challenged again in the U.S. novels, challenged in Wichita as blasphemous to the Prophet Muhammad. And here's the top 100 of 2001, 2009, 2000 to 2009, which Melinda Lowe used. This was the list she used to take a look at, to create her graph. So definitions, there's different levels. An expression of concern is just an inquiry that has judgmental overtones. This can happen when somebody says, "Are you sure you want this book in the library?" Or, "What do you think about this book?" An oral complaint is a more definitive challenge. Somebody comes up, "This is what happened to me. I was called a purveyor of porn in my public library because of the book I had, and I had a parent call me." The book was First French Kiss by Adam Bagdasarian, and I think the first chapter talked about a French kiss, and that's as far as it went. This wasn't diverse material, but she was complaining because her 16-year-old read the book, and of course I just said to her that not everybody objects to that material, and that there are some parents who are comfortable having their children read that, and if she's not comfortable having her children read the book in question, then she is perfectly within her rights to not allow her child to check it out. But I cannot make that decision for a majority of parents who may or may not be willing to have their children read this book. And I said it was in the teen section, and the teen section goes up to 18. And so, that's something that you should know when you're using the library, what kind of books are going to be found in this section. A written complaint takes it to the next level, where a formal written complaint is filled out, and we'll talk about where to find examples of written complaints, forms that you can give to people who want to take it to the next level. A public attack. This has been happening now. Some organizations will just disseminate a challenge and ask people to go into institutions to find these books and challenge them individually, but also just it'll go out to the media and say this book is not good, and we want it out of all books, and then out of all institutions, and then people get upset and they don't know the full story of the book or why the attack is being pushed. Censorship is actually the act of changing the access of the material. The book has been challenged, and whether that goes through a formal written complaint, the procedure that should accompany the complaint, or is just pulled willy-nilly by somebody who feels it could be the censorship generally is made by the library makes the decision. I've heard of instances where the principal gets a complaint, just comes and takes the book out of the library. This should not happen. The principal should follow, takes it out of the library or classroom. The principal should follow whatever policy you have set up, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. What policy you have set up for challenged materials, instead of just removing it. And censorship could include removing the book completely, putting the book behind the desk so you have to ask for it, excluding the book from the library, from getting the book in the library. Censorship also happens not so, probably not so much in your school libraries, and certainly not in your classroom libraries, but certainly in public libraries. Just saw a post where, it was one of Toni Morrison's books, maybe, I don't remember, but or it was a movie, and any copy of that media, whatever form, it was a book and a movie, and whatever form it was, they found them hidden all over the library. So this is a form of censorship in that if it's not on the shelf when it's supposed to be on the shelf, sometimes people will check them out and not return them because they feel it doesn't belong in the library. So they're circumventing the formal procedure for getting a book taken out of the library, and so they are doing censorship. It's not by the governing authority, but it's by somebody who's acting on their own. And then a challenge, you'll see that the books are called banned, which means they're censored, the ALA books, or challenged. And challenges are documented requests to remove the material from schools or libraries. Usually this is when it gets to the point of a written request or it gets into the media. Surveys indicate that up to 85% of book challenges receive no media attention and remain unreported. I did not report my conversation because it was an oral challenge, which was not followed up, even though I gave the woman a chance and the opportunity. I said, I have a form for you to fill out. I gave her that opportunity to do that, to be heard, but I just listened to her and tried very calmly. And the important thing is, if you're ever in a position like this, is to be extremely calm and realize that this is something that is not personal, even though it appears to be personal, and this woman was making it personal for me, but staying calm and listening to her and trying to make her understand that her opinion was not one that should be imposed on everybody who comes into the library. Her opinion that the book did not belong in the library could not be a unilateral reason to take the book out of the library. Sometimes challenges, very often challenges backfire. I love this quote by Susan Patrone, Higher Power of Lucky. In your readings this week, it'll mention her book and why it was a problem, but she says, if I were a 10-year-old, if I were any age, and learned that adults were worried that the current Newbery book was not appropriate for me, I'd figure out a way to get my mitts on it anyway. Its allure intensified by the exciting forbiddenness. So what gets a kid to do something faster than saying, no, you can't do that? And by the unexpressed but obvious fear on the parts of these adults. And I have a colleague who studied, her dissertation was on why people censor. And there's a real, it's hard, it seems crazy to us, but it's a real fear and a real, they feel like they need to protect their children. And I think they don't understand, personally, I think that it's a problem, but I think it's important to understand that this is something that they feel strongly about and they have worries about. So it's important to listen to those worries. But often I've heard of if a high school pulls a book out of the library, out of the reading curriculum or the summer reading list, then the author might donate books to the public library so that students can get them there. Anytime you hear something that's forbidden, it's going to have a little more cachet, especially among kids. So if you're challenged, it's important to have a materials selection policy. This is whether you're in the library or whether you're in the classroom. Your school should have a materials selection policy, one for the classroom, one for the library. And a grievance procedure that's a formal process for challenging a book and having it removed from the school. So there is challenge support that helps you out with this. Both ALA gives you and here they explain challenge censorship and how you can get personal support from the Office of Intellectual Freedom. You can call them and talk to them about how to handle it. They will help you if it becomes a big deal. They will provide resources that you need in order to get through this process and to think out how you're going to do it. Talk to somebody. Just even talking to somebody else makes a big difference when you're challenged. The National Council for Teachers of English also has an Intellectual Freedom Center. They have a report, a censorship incident form, which would be more appropriate if it's in your classroom library or in your curriculum books. And these are some really useful resources they have. Students' Right to Read, that I'm going to show you that in a minute. Sections of that in a minute. Guidelines for selection of materials in English language arts programs. So this is criteria, and it can be, you can kind of use this to develop a written policy. These policies should be board approved. Position statement regarding red flagging books or rating books. Statement on classroom libraries, that you should be free to develop your classroom libraries. Rationale for teaching challenge books, and beliefs about students' right to write. Sorry, dog's barking. Okay, so there's a lot of useful information here, NCTE. And then, go back to my PowerPoint. The overall NCTE resources, they have a lot of positions, some of the ones that they had before there, but also academic freedom, students' right to read, best practices for fair use. Oh, this is other information. Defining and defending instructional methods. So this is a little bit bigger than, this is interesting. These are kind of older. I guess this is interesting, is all of their, and look at this closely. I was just looking at the top. So that's useful. And then embedded within their students' right to read, they have, and this is very interesting, and you should read it, but embedded within it is the citizen's request for reconsideration of a work. And it requires them to fill this form out, and then it gives them a chance to formalize their complaint, identify how many others support the complaint, makes them think about why they're, if you have to write it down, it makes them think about why they're challenging the book. And you can also get an idea of if they're familiar with more than just they read in the newspaper that this book has a bad word in it. So number 5 is important to have them fill out. And number 4 also makes them think, the general purpose of the author in the book. So it gives them a way to slow down, articulate their objection. And now some people, you may find, if you look at a challenge, that it's the challenge, they may have filled this out, some organization may have filled this out, and they're filling it out, and you'll see similar language. But it also gives the person an opportunity to be heard. That's one of the things I think with the phone call that I had with that person. I listened to them. I just didn't, I tried to explain my position, but I also listened to her concerns and validated her concerns for her with her children. Yes, that's fine that you do not want your children reading that material. I have no problem with that, and you should definitely be familiar with the books that your children are reading if that's a concern. So this is a good thing to have on file, and to have the procedure for the complaint approved by the board and available at your fingertips. You should know where that is. And if you don't know, and you're teaching in an English class, if you're having anything to do with books in your classroom, you need to know where that is. ALA, which can, these two policies can cross. I'm talking about both of these, both because they both have good information, and also I know some of you are more in a library and some of you are in a classroom. So ALA just revamped. It was updated in January, their toolkit for challenges. They have a nice why do I need a policy, timing of policy creation, selection policies, and I believe they have, why is it not? Take it home. Selection policies for non-public, they've talked about school libraries in here too. So basic components of a selection, here it is, basic components of a selection policy, reconsideration procedure, so informal complaints, request for formal consideration. They also have the form, a sample letter to, sample, I went too far, sorry. Here's some letters, so they even give you what you can answer once this request for formal, I'm sorry, I apologize, I keep missing this. Sample reconsideration form. So here again, very similar to, a little shorter, but very similar to what we saw in NCTE. You might want to create a combination of the two forms and have this form available along with the procedure that needs to be undergone. There should be, oh, here's a sample school library request. So they have taken into consideration school libraries. So this has, this new toolkit has a lot of really good information for reconsideration committees, reconsideration policy resources. It's really, they just revamped it and added a lot. And as you can see here, it's public school and academic libraries. So I would, if you don't already have the material selection policy is important because that's what you can use to say this fits our criteria because of X, Y, and Z. And then the reconsideration policy is important because then when somebody comes in, you have a way to let them, if they want to take it past just a verbal complaint, you have something to give them and a procedure to follow. Now, I know that sometimes this is not going to be followed, and if you don't have tenure and the principal comes in and rips a book out of your library or out of your classroom, I know that there's not much you can do. But it is worth knowing that you should have these and asking to have them available for your own protection. And again, I'm going to put these the slides with the links up so you can access these links. Final thing I want to talk about is self-censorship. And this is often the effect of controversial books. A book, you read it, you think maybe somebody's going to complain about this. I'm not sure I can defend having it in my library, so I'm not going to purchase it. That's one way self-censorship happens. Another way is that you have individual biases that you aren't even necessarily aware of, and you look at books that you want to include and you may be excluding things because of biases. Before you took this course, you may have excluded material with, if you're in an all-white library, you may have thought, oh, I don't need this material that contains African Americans. And now you realize that we do need that. We do need our children and our students to see a variety, and it's better for them to see a variety of material. So self-censorship occurs if someone reviews a potentially controversial item, recommends it not be purchased because of lack of literary merit, even though other non-controversial materials in the collection also lacked literary merit. If you think, this book is really popular, but it might be unpopular with parents or pressure groups in the community, so I'm not going to purchase it. Or not considering your own biases, as I talked a little bit about biases. They can work in various ways. One I had to watch out for when I began purchasing books was I wanted to buy every book that had a cute animal on the cover. That was kind of a silly bias, but I was like, nope, just because it has a cute animal on the cover and that cute little doggy face is so adorable doesn't necessarily mean it's a good quality book that I need in order to balance my collection and understand and address needs that my patrons would have. But more seriously, not a fan of rap. Students are. That might be a bias you have, saying, oh, it's useless, it's not culturally relevant. I mean, it's not culturally good, but it works for students. Don't like the humor in Captain Underpants? Others might. Are you uncomfortable because picture books portray a family with two mothers? There are children in your school with two mothers, and they deserve to see their families in books, no matter their age. And they deserve it to be introduced to other students in their class so that other students can see that that's a normal thing, that just because their classmate has two mothers, that it's something that happens. It's not just that classmate. Don't want to have a book that includes mentions of Ramadan or Islam. Then all books that mention Christmas or Christianity must also go. You've got to balance it out. It's tough, but think about the kids who will thank you for helping them learn empathy and for the joy of seeing themselves and their families in books in your classroom or library. So the difference between selection and censorship in terms of self-censorship is selection is inclusion, a positive choice, including a book for excellence, curriculum need, balance of your collection, whether it be your curriculum collection or your library collection, where censorship is an exclusion and a negative feeling and a fear of outside criticism, non-literary reasons for not including a book in your collection, whether that be classroom or library. So that's it. I know censorship is very scary. I was very happy once I went through that phone call because it was like, okay, yes, I dealt with it. I stayed calm, I expressed my opinion, and she didn't go any further, which was really nice. I know sometimes it's more than that, but I think we have to be proactive and be an advocate for our kids and their needs. So this is the last lecture of the semester, and I want to thank you for exploring diverse books with us this semester. It was a really fun course to teach, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.